Most Porsche buyers still walk into the used market scared of the old hits: IMS, bore scoring, coolant pipes. And sure, those matter. But on a modern PDK car, the 5-figure trap that can smash your ownership math can start with the sensor pack buried inside the gearbox. Not broken gears, not a smoked clutch pack. It can start with one bad signal from what we can call the sensor trinity buried in the box, which we will break down in a minute. Then the dash lights up. The car shifts hard, or worse, it will not grab a gear at all. Here is the reality check. The dealer path is often not internal repair. It is full transmission replacement. That means an electronic fault can turn into a $20,000 to $30,000 quote fast. We are going to break down what those sensors do, why they fail, which models are exposed, what codes matter, and which repair path protects your wallet. PDK has a strong name, and it earned it. These gearboxes are quick, smooth, and in the real world, they make a 911, 981, 718, or Macan easier to actually drive every single day. That is part of the Porsche magic. The car still feels alive. It still hits you in the chest during launch control. Except now, you can do school pickup, traffic, and a back road in the same machine without wanting to throw the keys away. Now, here's the part most owners miss. When a PDK car throws a gearbox fault, people picture hard parts coming apart inside the case. They picture gears stripped bare or clutch packs burned to dust. That can happen, sure, but a lot of scary PDK failures start with bad electronic feedback, not catastrophic mechanical failure. That is the belief break. The gearbox can still be mechanically sound while the transmission control unit stops trusting what it sees. The distance sensor may report the wrong shift fork position, the speed sensor may send an implausible shaft speed, the pressure or temperature side may tell the control unit something that does not line up with what the rest of the box is doing. Once the brain loses confidence, it protects itself. Harsh shifts, limp mode, no gear engagement, maybe no movement at all. And boom, this is where the money gets ugly. Most dealers are not opening these units and replacing one internal sensor assembly. Porsche policy leans toward replacing the full transmission. So, a fault that may start with a bad signal can snowball into a quote that looks like engine rebuild money. 20 grand, 25, even 30 by the time parts, labor, fluid, setup, and coding land on the invoice. Think about what that means for a second. You bought a Porsche because it is not just transport, it is identity. It is engineering you can feel. And on the used side, the smart money play has always been buying the right generation, keeping service records tight and avoiding the known disasters. Then this shows up and flips the whole ownership math upside down. A car with a gearbox fault in its history becomes a negotiation bloodbath. Buyer confidence drops, trade value drops, your leverage disappears. It's a modern-day IMS bearing scenario all over again. And that is why this matters beyond one repair bill. PDK is what makes a modern Porsche so usable. It lets the 911 thrill you and still work in daily life without compromise. So when one warning light makes the transmission feel like a financial grenade, it hits hard. But here is where smart money separates itself from scared money. These are advanced ZF units. If the fault is sensor-led, diagnosis matters more than panic. And once you see how that system works inside the box, the whole failure pattern starts to make sense. So let's get right into the hardware, because once you see what this part is doing, a lot of these fault codes stop looking random. A PDK is basically two gearboxes packed into one case. One side handles one set of gears. The other side handles the other set. while you are pulling in one gear, the next one is already lined up and waiting on the other shaft. That is why PDK feels so sharp. It is not guessing. It is preloading the next move before you ask for it. But that speed only works if the transmission control unit knows exactly what is happening inside the box. Not close, exact. It needs to know where the shift forks are, how fast the shafts are turning, and whether the hydraulic side is giving the pressure it should. That is the whole electronic chain. Break one link, and the gearbox starts acting like it forgot how to be a gearbox. Now, the distance sensor sits near the shift forks, and its job is to measure their lateral movement. Think of the shift forks like the hands inside the transmission. They move parts into place so the right gear gets selected. The distance sensor tells the control unit where those hands really are, not where the computer hoped they went, where they actually went. Here is what is actually happening inside that transmission. On the ZF7DT45 and 7DT70 PDK units used across a lot of 2009 to 2016 Porsche applications, hydraulic pressure pushes the forks left and right. As they move, the sensor tracks that movement and turns it into a signal the TCU can read. On the factory setup, Porsche uses an OEM-style inductive LVDT design with multiple sensing modules in one assembly. The fork moves. Electromagnetic coupling changes. That change becomes a usable signal. Then the TCU compares it against what it expected to see. And this is where the rest of the sensor trinity comes in. The distance sensor is not working alone. The speed sensors watch shaft speed. The pressure and temperature circuits watch hydraulic health and heat. The transmission brain cross-checks all of it: fork position, shaft speed, pressure, temperature. If those signals stop agreeing, the TCU gets nervous fast. That is why one bad sensor can mimic a dying gearbox. The hard parts may still be fine, but the control unit no longer trusts the story the sensors are telling. And here is the catch. These sensors live in a rough place. Heat well over 200 degrees, cold starts, vibration, fluid splash, constant thermal cycling. Over time, you can get coil damage, solder fatigue, semiconductor wear, wiring faults, or plain old signal drift. Nothing dramatic has to explode. The signal just stops being clean. Then you get the real-world symptoms: rough shifts, delayed engagement, wrong gear display, limp mode. Maybe it sticks in neutral. Maybe it will not move at all. You look at that and think catastrophic failure. Except sometimes the gears and clutches are still perfectly serviceable. And that is exactly why the codes matter so much next. Now, we get to the part that saves people real money, because once the warning is on the dash, you need to sort signal faults from true mechanical damage fast. This is where bad diagnosis turns a repairable Porsche into a $20,000 panic move. Start with the distance sensor family. The big group to remember is P1731 through P1738. If you see those, your brain should go straight to shift fork position feedback. In plain English, the transmission is struggling to confirm where the internal selector parts really are. That does not automatically mean broken gears. It means the box is losing trust in position data. Then you have the gear engagement and plausibility faults. P1764, P1765. P1773, P1774, and P073D. These show up when the TCU commands a gear, but cannot prove the gear engaged the way it should have. So you get flashing gear displays, delayed drive or reverse, or a car that just refuses to move. That sounds like full gearbox death, except sometimes it is still a sensor story upstream. Now, go to the speed sensor side. Watch for P173D, P173E, P1744, and P1745. These matter because the TCU is always comparing expected shaft speed with actual shaft speed. If those numbers stop lining up, the box starts doubting the whole event. Harsh shifts, limp mode, wrong gear logic, no drive. You have probably seen owners describe cars that felt fine 1 minute and completely confused the next. This is one reason why. Then come the secondary ratio faults, P073, P0731, and P0732. These are the ones that scare buyers because they sound like hard mechanical carnage. Incorrect gear ratio, gear train fault, big language, big fear, but here is the reality check. Ratio faults are often downstream, not upstream. If the distance sensor is lying or the speed sensor is unstable, the TCU cannot match position to rotation, so it throws a ratio code. That does not automatically mean the guts are destroyed. Last group to flag is the pressure side, especially P0841, and sometimes related pressure plausibility faults. This is where diagnosis gets more serious, because now you have to separate bad hydraulic data from an actual hydraulic problem. Pressure codes do not guarantee catastrophic failure either, but they do raise the stakes. So here is the screenshot version. Distance sensor codes P1731 to P1738. Gear plausibility codes P1764, P1765, P1773, P1774, P073D. Speed sensor codes P173D, P173E, P1744, P1745. Ratio codes P073 to P0732. Pressure warning P0841. Save that list. Now, codes alone are not enough. You also need symptom pattern. Common signs are a gearbox fault warning, a flashing gear indicator, delayed engagement into drive or reverse, rough low-speed shifts, a sudden drop into limp mode, or the car sticking in neutral. Some cars will still move part of the time. That is what traps buyers. Sellers clear them, the car behaves for 20 minutes, then heat soak brings the whole problem right back. So here is what smart money does on a pre-purchase inspection. Use PIWIS or a real Porsche-capable scan tool, not generic OBD junk. Pull stored, pending, and historical transmission faults. Ask for adaptation values, clutch data, fluid condition, and evidence of recent code clearing. Test the car cold, then fully hot. Do low-speed stop and go. Check reverse engagement. Watch first to second. See if launch from a stop feels clean or hesitant. And one more thing. Low miles do not protect you here. We have seen low-mile PDK cars throw these faults too. A clean dash means nothing without code history. So do not buy the story. Buy the data, because the next decision is the repair path. And that is where the bill either stays sane or goes completely off the rails. So now we get to the part that matters when the fault is real and the scan report is sitting in front of you. What do you actually do next? And how do you stop a bad signal from turning into a terrible money decision? Worst case first, the dealer replacement path. This is the nuclear option. New or reman PDK unit, dealer labor, fresh fluids, setup, coating, and all the extra line items that always show up once the car is apart. The math is brutal. 20,000, 25, sometimes 30 by the time the invoice is done. If your car is under factory warranty, under CPO, or you have a real shot at goodwill, this path can make sense because Porsche owns the risk. If they want to put a whole box in the car on their dime, let them. Here is the reality check though. Once the car is out of warranty, especially if it came from a non-Porsche dealer, the odds of meaningful goodwill usually drop hard. You can spend days making calls and still end up with the same answer. Replace the unit, pay the bill, That is why out-of-warranty owners need to slow down before they approve anything. The next option is the one that looks smart on paper and bites people later: used or salvage PDK. You find a transmission for 4, 5, maybe 8 grand depending on model. Add install labor, fluid setup, and coating, and yes, the total can still land far below dealer money, except you are buying a sealed story you cannot verify. Unknown heat cycles, unknown service record, unknown abuse. Maybe the donor car was rear-ended. Maybe it already had an intermittent sensor fault. Maybe it sat for months after an impact. The cheap headline price is not the whole deal. Now, here is where smart money usually starts paying attention: independent specialist internal repair. This is often the best route when the codes point towards sensor trouble and there is no clear evidence of hard part damage. A real PDK specialist can pull the unit, inspect the fluid, check for metal, open the case, and confirm what actually failed. That changes everything, because if the gear sets and clutch packs are still healthy, funding a whole replacement box makes no sense. And this is where the cost spread gets very interesting. In many sensor-led cases, you are not talking dealer money at all. You are talking about a component-level sensor solution advertised around $1,099 for the part itself, and roughly $3 to $5 grand for a more involved specialist repair once labor, seals, fluid, and calibration are in the mix. Could it go higher? Sure, depending on the model and how deep the shop has to go, but it is still nowhere near $20,000 to $30,000. Let me break this down because this is the table you want in your head. Dealer replacement, roughly $20,000 to $30,000 plus diagnostics and setup. Specialist component level repair, about $1,099 for the sensor assembly on the parts side, and roughly $3,000 to $5,000 total in many sensor related cases. Used or salvage transmission, often $4,000 to $8,000 just for the unit before labor and coating. Think about what that means for a second. The gap between lazy diagnosis and precise diagnosis can be the price of another car. But here is where most people mess up. They hear component level repair and assume easy fix. It is not. The part may be cheaper than a transmission, but the job is still serious. The box has to come out, or at least come apart enough for internal access. Fluids come out. Routing matters. Assembly matters. Calibration matters. One pinched wire, one bad seal, one sloppy reassembly, and now you created a new problem inside a very expensive gearbox. So the decision tree is actually simple. If the car is under warranty, start with the dealer. If the car is out of warranty and the codes are pointing at distance, speed, or pressure-related faults without proof of hard mechanical damage, get it to a shop that repairs PDK internals, not one that only swaps units. That distinction matters more than people realize. Ask direct questions. Is there metal in the fluid? Are clutch adaptations out of range? Do the faults look primary or secondary? Is this a sensor assembly issue, a wiring issue, or true internal damage? Can the transmission be repaired, or are we already past that point? A Porsche should make you sharper, not reckless. So when the warning hits, do not keep cycling the ignition. Do not pray the message disappears. And do not sign off on a full transmission until someone who truly understands PDK internals tells you what actually failed. So let's turn all of this into something you can use before a warning light ever shows up. Because good Porsche ownership is not luck. It is process. You are buying a machine that is supposed to sharpen your day, not blindside your bank account. So the checklist matters. If you are shopping for a PDK car, scan first, not after the test drive. First, use PIWIS or a real Porsche level tool and pull stored, pending, and historical transmission faults. You want the full story, not the polished seller version. If you see distance sensor codes, speed sensor codes, or pressure plausibility faults, pause the deal right there and sort the fault before you talk price. Next, test the car cold, not warm from the seller moving it around. Cold. Watch how it goes into drive and reverse. Feel the first few low-speed shifts, then get it fully hot and do it again in stop-and-go traffic. Heat is where intermittent sensor faults love to show themselves. Delayed reverse, harsh 1-2 shifts, a flashing gear display, limp mode history, or a hesitant launch are not personality quirks. They are warnings. Now, look at service records with a hard eye. PDK fluid and filter history matters. Do not hide behind the longest factory interval and call it good. Best practice is closer to 40,000 miles or 4 years if you want to stay ahead of contamination and heat wear, especially on cars that live in traffic, heat, or hard use. And if you see repeated code clearing without a real repair invoice, walk away or price the car like a problem car. Here is the move most buyers miss. Get the pre-purchase inspection from a shop that can repair PDKs internally, not just replace them. That one choice changes the whole conversation. A replacement-only shop sees a gearbox fault and starts building a 5-figure estimate. A repair-capable specialist starts asking whether the hard parts are even hurt. Here is the reality check though. Those shops are rare. Owners on Renlist keep pointing to places like Atlanta Speedworks because dealer networks replace full units and only a small handful of independents are known for getting inside these boxes. So if you find a real PDK internal repair specialist, that contact is worth keeping. If you already own the car and the warning comes up, stop driving it hard right away. Do not keep cycling the ignition. Do not keep forcing shifts to see if it clears up. Pull the codes properly. Ask for fluid inspection, ask if there is metal, ask if the faults look primary or secondary. Ask whether the gearbox is mechanically damaged or whether the sensor pack is leading the whole mess. And one more thing, keep records like you plan to sell the car to a skeptical engineer, because one day you probably will. A Porsche is not transportation. It is a feeling you earn and protect. Clean scans, proper service, specialist invoices, and early diagnosis preserve that feeling. They also preserve your leverage when it is time to sell. So now you know the big mistake. It is not buying a PDK Porsche. It is treating every gearbox warning like total transmission death before you verify the sensor story underneath it. Here is your challenge. Save the code families from this video. And before you buy any PDK car, ask one question that changes everything. Do you repair these internally, or do you only replace them? If the answer is replace only, that is not enough. And if you want the next layer, watch the follow-up on the safest used PDK Porsche generations. Because the right 997.2, 981, or 991 can still give you that flat 6 feeling in your chest without turning ownership into a financial ambush.